My name is Myrtle Rosenfeld. I'm 66 years old. I live alone in a simple little house in the West Ashley neighborhood here in Charleston. I've been a seamstress, a wife, a full-time mother. Today, I am just a woman who survived what many do not have the courage to admit. I was forgotten by my own children, and that happened on the day my heart almost stopped for good. Have you ever wondered what you would do if you were dying, and your children decided to go to a party? That's exactly what happened to me. As I was taken unconscious to the hospital, they toasted with champagne and 3-story cakes. Maybe you're thinking, how does a mother get to this point? How does someone who gave everything for a family end up becoming a burden, a forgotten detail? If this doubt also worries you, then you have come to the right place. In this video, I'm going to tell you everything. No shouting, no exaggeration. Only the truth, with the calm of someone who saw the mask fall too late. And when the story is over, you may never see the word family with the same eyes again, because sometimes, loving too much, it costs his own life. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. I died for 4 minutes. My heart stopped 3 times inside the ambulance. And while the doctors struggled to keep me alive, my children, the same ones I raised with my own hands, were too busy serving snacks at a party hosted by my daughter-in-law. The doctor said it was urgent, that I might not be able to resist that night. And yet, they toasted with champagne. I heard this later, from the nurse on the morning shift. Alone, intubated, among machines that whistled like a farewell clock. If you are here listening to this story, I ask you, stay with me. Really, click on the like, subscribe. But above all, stay here with me until the end. Because opening this wound is not easy. I don't tell this to anyone, but if you've ever felt disposable by those who should love you, then maybe this story is yours too. And sometimes, all we need is someone who listens, without judging, someone who understands what it means to be forgotten, and yet move forward with dignity. When I opened my eyes, everything was blurred. The first thing I felt was the air entering my nose through tubes, as if I'd been pulled back from somewhere very far away. The room was cold, the white lights hurt my eyes, and the smell, that hospital smell, mixed with a metallic taste in my mouth, stuck in my throat as if to remind me that I was still here, even though no one else seemed to remember it. The heart monitor beeped rhythmically, but with subtle flaws. Each failure made me wonder, is it now? Nurse Ashley was by my side, young, with a poorly tied bun and a gentle look, one of those who try to hide the fatigue of the dawn shift. She realized that I had woken up and approached carefully. "Mrs. Rosenfeld, welcome back. You gave us a scare." I tried to speak, but I couldn't. Everything hurt. My chest felt like it was sewn with wire, and my throat was rough as sandpaper. She held my hand. "You don't need to make an effort. You've had serious heart surgery. There were 3 stops, but we did it. You're strong." Strong. That word has haunted me for years. Everyone has always said that. Myrtle is strong. When Harold left me, when I had to raise Logan and Matthew alone, when I sold my favorite sewing machine to pay the rent, I was strong. But no one asked if I wanted to be. Ashley then looked me in the eye and, in a sweet voice, asked if I wanted her to let my family know that I had woken up. My eyes watered. She didn't know. We've called them a few times," she continued, more hesitantly. "In fact, their doctor spoke to them before the surgery. He said it was urgent, but they said they were at an event and that they would stop by tomorrow." An event. My children were at an event. It was there, in that silent Tuesday morning, that everything in me broke. I was one breath away from death, and they, laughing, toasting, taking pictures with friends. Did anyone tell them that their mother was technically pronounced dead for 4 minutes? That my heart stopped 3 times? That one more stop was enough? And would they receive a call informing them of the time of death? Ashley squeezed my hand when she noticed my tears. "Do you want me to stay here for a while?" I just shook my head. She sat next to me, holding my wrist, checking my blood pressure and trying, with her silent presence, to fill in what was missing. My children. I looked out the window. The lights of the city still shone, small and distant as old dreams. I wondered how many mothers, like me, were there, alive, but forgotten. How many gave everything, and were returned with the minimum. I'm going to pause on this part because my heart still hurts when I remember. No, There is a pain that only a mother feels. The pain of being forgotten not because it died, but because it no longer serves. Have you been through this? Ever felt that no matter how much love you give, it's never enough? If this pain has already touched you, comment here so I know I'm not alone. It can be just a, "I've lived it," or "It touched me," because sometimes all we want is not to feel invisible. In that cold room, everything made sense. The absence at parties, the invitations that never came, the dinners that became silent. Tiffany and Emily have always been good at disguising it. But my children, they chose. They allowed it. Logan allowed Tiffany to push me away. Matthew let Emily erase my presence from their lives as if I were an uncomfortable stain. It was there, looking at the city that saw me grow old, that I whispered, almost voiceless, "I'm alone, but I'm alive." And for the first time in a long time, I realized that changes everything. But what exactly changed in me that morning? And what did I decide to do with this loneliness that suffocated me like a wet sheet? You'll find out now, because what happened in the following days, no one could have imagined. Lying in that hospital, with my body bruised and my chest still sewn up, made me go back to a time when pain was routine. But I didn't call it pain. I called it duty. I found myself at the age of 38, holding 2 boys by the hand in the cramped backyard of the rented house in North Charleston. It was a sultry summer, and I was hanging clothes on the line while Logan played with a broken truck, and Matthew, still in diapers, pulled my skirt asking for milk. At that time, I worked 3 shifts. I sewed school uniforms at night, washed clothes outside during the day, and cleaned Mr. Bell's cafeteria at dawn. My eyes were barely open, but my children had something to eat, and that was all for me. I remember as if it were now the pain in my wrists, the smell of stone soap in my hands, the old stove making noise when I prepared rice with sausage cut into cubes. I remember cooking with a stained apron, humming softly so as not to fall asleep standing up. When Harold left us, I had no time to revolt. He left on a Friday saying he was going to breathe, and never returned. Nor pension, not a penny, not a phone call at Christmas. I was young, you know? He was still 38, with long hair and a waist that time had not yet widened. I had suitors later, even good men. One of them brought me flowers every Tuesday. But every time I saw Logan sleeping with his mouth open, or saw Matthew making those crooked drawings that said it was the 3 of us, I chose to stay. Being a mother was my world. I traded the chance to love fully for them, and I don't regret it. It just hurts. It hurts to know that every night ironing clothes, every callus, every plate shared, it went up in smoke in their memory. At school, when Logan cried because someone said he didn't have a father, I would stay up late, sewing a new backpack for him, prettier than any other boy's. When Matthew got pneumonia and we didn't have health insurance, I sold my only gold ring to pay for the private consultation. I never told him that. For what? A mother does not throw suffering in her face. Mother holds alone, swallows and follows. But there, in that hospital, looking at the ceiling full of cracks, I felt a gentle anger. An anger without screaming, without scandal. Only a burning silence. I wondered where I lost myself. Was it when I stopped going to the salon to buy books for Logan? Or when I turned down Mr. Henderson's proposal because Matthew was still wetting the bed and needed me at night? And now they were too busy at a party. A party. No. When you give your all for someone, without ever measuring, without ever keeping anything for yourself, you believe that this love will be eternal. That one day when you're tired, someone will take you by the hand and say, "Let me take care of it now." But that day did not come, and maybe it never will. That morning, between machines and sorrows, I understood that loving is no guarantee of being loved back, and that, for a mother, is a pain that has no name, but it is also a liberation. And it was at this exact point in my life that something began to change. Something inside me moved, as if, after years of being just a mother, I began to remember that I am also a woman. And what happened in the days following this revelation, it's what no one would ever imagine. Have you ever felt the exact moment when everything changes inside? Because it was there that I decided, either I would die for good or reborn. But what does it mean to be reborn after 60? When you've already been given up as finished? Do you really want to know? So wait until you hear what I did after I left that hospital. Logan met Tiffany at a marketing conference in Atlanta, if I'm not mistaken. She was one of those women who arrive in any room and already look around as if they were evaluating the environment, not out of curiosity, but out of calculation. I worked with corporate events, dealt with important people, always talked about personal branding, image presence, these modern things that I never really understood. At first, I thought it was just her way, kind of cold, kind of distant. I tried to get closer, prepared my roast chicken and potatoes at the first dinner she came home. She smiled, but didn't eat much. She said she was not used to such heavy food. I laughed, trying to take it as a joke, but there, deep down, I felt that something had changed. It was the first time anyone looked at my food and saw no affection, only fat. Matthew, on the other hand, brought Emily to meet the family a year later. Teacher, polite, kind to everyone. In front of the others, it was all praise, but in particular, it was like an icy breeze that came in unnoticed. Emily didn't confront me. She slid over me. She would say with a sweet smile that the rug in my living room reminded me of her grandmother's house in the 40s, and ask if I had ever considered redecorating it with more current tones. I laughed, not knowing if it was a joke or advice. The truth is that it was all very subtle at first. First, invitations decreased. Then we already had plans. This weekend is going to be busy. Let's arrange another time. When I realized it had been 3 months since I had seen my grandchildren, Tiffany was more direct. One Sunday afternoon, Logan took me to their new house. Beautiful, spacious, with furniture that looked like it came out of a magazine. I took him a corn cake that he has always loved since he was little. Tiffany picked up the plate with a tight smile and said, "Oh, what a sweet gesture, Myrtle. But Logan is on a low-carb diet now." And he placed the plate in the corner of the counter, as if I had taken something expired. Emily never turned anything down. He only made a point of saying, in a low voice, when everyone had left the table, "I prefer less traditional desserts, but it's nice to see that you still like to cook." He likes to cook, as if it were a hobby, not a lifetime dedicated to feeding children with what was in the fridge. There was a Christmas. I remember it well. I was excited because I had bought gifts for the children, wrapped with red bows that I made with scraps that I kept from the time I sewed party dresses. 3 days before supper, Emily called saying that this year they preferred to spend with her mother because the children feel more at home there. I said I understood. She thanked me for my understanding and hung up. I kept the presents piled up on the edge of the sofa. On the 25th, I had lunch alone, roast chicken again, out of habit, and a glass of wine that made me dizzy before its time. I wondered all the time what I had done wrong. Did I intrude too much? Was I them when they were little? Did I overdo the care? Because no one teaches us that being too much of a mother also becomes a mistake. Nobody tells you that the more you give, the more they will take you away. But at the time, I didn't see it as rejection. I thought it was time, that they were growing up, getting married, creating their own lives. I didn't see that. Little by little, I was being replaced by women who said they loved my children, but who never understood what it was to truly love. You know that feeling of being in the living room, but not be more part of the conversation? To be seated at the table, but have already lost your seat? That's how I felt on Sunday visits, when they still happened. An old piece of furniture in a beautiful corner. Someone who praises himself out of respect, but does not really listen. Tiffany started calling me Grandma Myrtle, with that tone of someone who talks to someone who no longer understands things very well. Emily preferred to keep conversations superficial. He never looked me in the eye for more than 2 seconds. And Logan, my sweet boy, he would look over his cell phone while I told him some memory of his childhood, as if it were a background podcast. Matthew even tried to smile, but he was always busy, always running, always in a hurry to take the kids to swimming, to therapy, to English. I was a visitor who needed to end soon. I was an interruption, and it was exactly at this point in history that something even more cruel happened, something that no mother should hear. Want to know what it was? I'll tell you, but first, tell me, would you be able to recognize the exact moment when you were erased from your own family's history? Because was about to happen. The removal did not come all at once. No, he arrived slowly, like dust coming in through the crack in the window. We hardly notice, until everything is covered. First there were the weekends. Tiffany said that the children were on a new schedule of activities and needed to maintain their routine. Then It started with the delicate comments that deep down sounded like a no. The lady's house is small, Myrtle. There is not much space for them to sleep comfortably. You know how it is, right? Children need structure. I listened, smiled, and swallowed. Emily also had her own way. You don't need to cook, Myrtle. Let's ask for something lighter so you don't get tired. Or when I spent hours preparing my famous cornbread, she would say, smiling, Oh, mother-in-law, you still keep those old recipes. What nostalgia. Nostalgia. As if I were an old radio playing a song that no one listens to anymore. The telephone? Before, it played every Sunday. Then it changed to once a week. And over time, it became a notification. Hi, Myrtle. Okay? We are in a hurry. Then we'll call. And they didn't care. On the children's birthdays, I took gifts bought with a lot of sacrifice and was received at the gate with that, thank you. We'll open it later, okay? Tiffany said that the gift could disorganize the pedagogical planning of the children. Matthew said nothing. I just averted my eyes. I always came home with the feeling that I invaded a space where I no longer fit. Still, I tried to understand. I said to myself that it was a phase, that times have changed, that young people have another mind. And when I told Eleanor, my neighbor, she said what I didn't want to hear. They're pushing you away, Myrtle. They're taking you out little by little so it doesn't hurt so much when they take you out for good. But I refused to believe it. How could I accept that my own children were turning their backs on me? With politeness, with kindness, with perfect justifications. There was no more Sunday dinner. Tiffany preferred food by delivery. Emily claimed that the full house made the children agitated. I saw my place being removed from the table, chair by chair, until only silence remained. When I tried to talk to Logan about it, he smiled and said, Mom, you're too sensitive. We love you, but our life is busy now, you know. Understand. That was all they expected of me. That I understood. That I should be quiet. That I would resign myself to the function of a decorative figure. But even so, I was still there. I made cookies. Left them at the entrance. She sewed clothes for her grandchildren, even though she knew they might not even wear them. Mother's love has these things. We insist even when the heart already knows that it is no use. And look, if you're still here listening to me, if you've come this far with your chest a little tight, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel, because I'm here, opening my heart, telling this story with everything I have. And there's still a lot you need to know. What's next? It was what finally woke me up from this torpor, because there was a day that they crossed all limits. Want to know what they did? I'll tell you, but hold your heart. Because even I didn't imagine that my own children would be capable of that. I must have been suspicious when Logan asked me to lunch alone. It had been a long time since he had done that. It was on a cloudy Saturday, and he chose a restaurant downtown, one of those modern ones, where the menu has a difficult name and everything seems small on the plate. He arrived smiling, gave me a kiss on the forehead, asked how I was feeling. It's been a while since we've talked just the two of us, right, Mom? He said in that sweet tone he used when he was a child and wanted to ask for something. Lunch was full of beating around the bush. He praised my strength, said he missed the times when it was just the three of us. I felt a warmth in my chest, a silly illusion, thinking that he was finally wanting to get closer. But then came the real matter, the house. Mom, Tiffany and I have our eye on a house in Mount Pleasant. It's perfect, spacious, with a garden for the boys to play in, but we need a bigger entry. I was silent. He continued, We were thinking, maybe if you sold the house on Ashley Avenue, you could move into a smaller apartment and lend us the difference. Only for 2 years. I promise, Mom. 2 years. I'll give you back every penny. That house. It was where my children grew up, where I hung their drawings on the fridge with a flower magnet, where Harold left for the last time slamming the door, where my life happened. But I sold it. I sold it for love. Because once again, I believed that being a mother was putting the dreams of my children above my own. I went to live in an apartment without an elevator, on a cramped second floor, where the kitchen barely held a round table. I donated half of my furniture. I was left with a sofa, a bed, and my old sewing machine, which I kept as if hiding a piece of itself. Logan promised me that as soon as Tiffany closed the first big contract with the new company, they would return it to me. 2 years. 3 have passed. When I asked, it was always the same answer. We're tight now, Mom, but everything is under control. Tiffany avoided the subject. They pretended that they had never made any promises. And I I kept quiet, because it hurt too much to admit that I was used. And just for him, my eldest son. The one I carried on my lap with a fever, which I took on foot to school when the bus broke down. But it didn't stop there. A while later, Matthew appeared. He called me on a Tuesday night, distressed. He said he needed to talk. He came alone. He sat on the couch in my living room, nervous, hands sweating. "Mom, it's a new project, an educational technology startup. I'm leading the team. I just need an initial push. 10,000. It's to save the company. 10,000. It was all I had saved from retirement. I had gathered that money as if piling up hope for an emergency, for a health problem, for a future that I was already beginning to fear. But he looked at me with the same eyes that asked me for powdered milk when I was a boy, and I, dumb with love, opened the account. I transferred everything. Do you know how long the company lasted? 6 months. It closed silently. When I asked him what happened, he said, "The market has changed, Mom. It was unlucky. Bad luck. I lost my security, my peace." And they went on as if nothing. They continued to go to dinners, go on trips, buy expensive toys for the children I hardly saw. And yet, I still thought it was a phase. What a real mother can handle everything. That soon everything would be fixed. But something in me was already starting to crack. It was like a crack in the glass. Small, almost invisible, until the day it shatters completely. And that day, it was closer than I imagined. Have you ever felt when the ground starts to give way slowly, but no one notices? Well, that's exactly how the end began. And the next scene, it was the cruelest blow of all, because it didn't hurt the pocket. It hurt my soul. Want to know what they did? Get ready, because there are things that not even the strongest heart can stand silent. It was a beautiful Sunday, with open skies and the smell of cut grass coming from the street. I remember it well because I put on my light blue dress, the only one that still left me with some vanity, hair tied up carefully, small pearl earring that I got from my mother. It was my birthday. 66 years of life. 66. But no one said anything. Not a flower, not a congratulations, not that tighter hug that we feel when we really come. Tiffany was in the kitchen, preparing a functional salad. He said that everything was ready, that he didn't need help. "Today lunch will be light, Myrtle. Frying doesn't match your age anymore, right?" I smiled without answering. That had already become a habit, receiving small criticisms wrapped in care. The worst kind of rejection is the one that comes with a smile. Matthew and Emily arrived soon after with the children running around the room. Emily was beaming, talking about her party, which would be on Wednesday. 73 guests confirmed. It will be in Charleston Plaza, Golden Hall. "We're going to have live jazz and a full buffet," she said, looking at Tiffany, as if I wasn't there. I listened to every detail of that party, as if listening to another language, because that day, no one noticed the cake I had bought for myself and left in the fridge of my apartment. No one asked what I wanted, if I had a wish, a request, a simple, "How is your heart today?" And perhaps by irony of fate, my heart responded. In the middle of the afternoon, while everyone was laughing at a silly video on my cell phone, I felt a pang in my chest. It started discreetly, like a deep needle. I took a deep breath and pretended to scratch my arm, to disguise the tension. Logan looked at me quickly. "Is everything okay, Mom?" I shook my head, trying not to worry. "Just tiredness. It must be the heat." They went back to the video. Tiffany laughed out loud, holding a glass of lemon water. I got up, went to the bathroom, took a deep breath about 10 times. When I returned, no one had noticed. I came home early. I made up some excuse, something about needing to hang clothes. The truth is that I just wanted to go back to my silence. My chest still hurt, but I didn't want to give it a hard time. I lay on the couch and stared at the ceiling for hours. The phone didn't ring. No message. Then, at 10:18 p.m., the pain returned. Strong, hot, as if a hand was squeezing my heart from the inside. I took out my phone and called Logan. His voice was muffled, as if he were watching television. "Mom? Hi. How are you?" I said I wasn't feeling well. "The chest is tightening, Logan." He paused and said, "Have some chamomile tea. It must be stress. Get some sleep. If it doesn't get better, let me know in the morning." In the morning. I thanked him. I didn't cry on the phone. I waited for it to hang up. And then, yes, I cried. I cried slowly, without noise. I cried as those who know they have nowhere else to run, who has understood that, for some, you have become a burden, a shadow of what it was, a nuisance that needs to be dealt with patience, but not with love. I curled up on the couch, as if trying to protect what was left of me, and it was there, at that moment, that I felt, with my soul, not with my body, that something very serious was about to happen. I didn't know that. A few hours later, I would see death up close. But what hurt the most, it was knowing that, even so, no one would come. And look, if you've made it this far, stay with me. Because what happened that morning, everything changed. It is now that my story begins to turn. And it wasn't out of revenge. It was for survival. Do you want to know what a woman does when she understands that she is alone even when she dies? So wait and see. Because it was at that point that I was reborn. It was Tuesday, still dark outside, when I woke up with a pain that left no doubt. It was the heart, but not like the other times. It was a deep, sharp pain, as if someone squeezed the center of my chest hard and didn't let go. I sat slowly on the couch, tried to breathe, but the air was short, as if I had been climbing an infinite slope. I picked up the phone. My hands trembled. Instead of calling Logan, I already knew it was no use. I dialed Eleanor's number. "Hello?" Her voice came sleepily. "It's me, Myrtle. I'm not well." That was enough. 15 minutes later, she was at my door, in her nightgown, coat over, and her slippers crooked. She took me to the taxi that she called herself. The driver didn't even ask anything. He only saw 2 old women entering and understood everything with his eyes. On the way, everything was getting farther away. The streetlights, the stores, the faces on the sidewalks. My heart stopped for the first time right there, between Rutledge Avenue and Calhoun Street. The second stop came in the taxi, and I only remember Eleanor's muffled scream saying, "Hold on, woman, hold on a little longer." The third was already at the entrance to the emergency room of Charleston Medical Center. I was pulled back to life 3 times, and while doctors and nurses ran around me, the doctor called my children. He explained the severity. He said, in no uncertain terms, that this might be their mother's last night. And do you know what I heard later? From Nurse Ashley? "Your son said they have an event, and that they will see if they can pass it later." Tiffany was coordinating the buffet. Emily, sorting out the dress. Me, there, with tubes in his throat, his chest open and his soul in pieces. And they, concerned with decoration. No calls, no visits, not a message asking if I was still alive. When I came back from surgery, the first thing I saw was the bluish light from the heart monitor and the emptiness around the bed. No one holding my hand, no familiar faces, no voice saying, "I'm here." And you know, at that moment, I understood. I was clinically alive, yes, but emotionally, for them, I had already died a long time ago. And the cruelest, it's just that they didn't even miss it. Now listen to me with your heart. There is a pain that has no name. It's the pain of realizing that you've been forgotten by the people you loved the most in the world. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever felt that heavy silence which screams more than any fight? If you've ever been through something like this, or even if you just fear it will, comment below. It can be just a "I know how it is," or a "I understand you." Sometimes, just knowing that there is someone else on the other side of the screen, we feel a little less invisible, because that's how I felt in that cold bed. Invisible. But it was also there that something inside me ignited. Not anger, no, of lucidity. And when lucidity arrives, she does not forgive. Do you want to know what I did after I understood that my life, for them, was not even worth the value of a party dress? So get ready, because it was at that moment that I started to plan my highest silence, and no one saw it coming. The nights in the hospital seem to have no end. Time there has a different rhythm. It's as if every second lasts for hours, as if loneliness echoes louder than one's own heartbeat. The bluish light of the corridors crossed the crack in the bedroom door, and I stood there, awake, staring at the ceiling, with my chest sewn on the outside and shattered on the inside. I didn't cry anymore. Something in me had emptied, and in that void, I started writing. I asked Ashley, the nurse, for a simple notebook. She brought me along with a blue pen. I said it was just to write down recipes, but she knew. Deep down, she knew. I wrote everything, but not as an outburst, I wrote it as a record, line by line, calmly, as if weaving his own shroud with dignity. Dear children, I began like this, and then came the facts. Not the screams, not the open sorrows, but the details that no one can deny. I wrote about the lunches where I was ignored, about the cake I bought on my last birthday, about the house I sold for empty promises, about the grandchildren's gifts that were never opened, about the chamomile tea they offered me while my heart screamed for help. One by one, each contempt, each silence, each absence dressed in politeness. But I didn't blame anyone. I didn't ask for forgiveness. And above all, I did not beg for love, because that love I had already understood no longer existed, at least not in the way I offered it all my life. At the end of the letter, I wrote only, "You don't need to look for me. I'm where I've always been, where it doesn't hurt anymore." I folded it carefully, put it in a brown envelope, and wrote it by hand. Deliver on Sunday, 5 p.m. On the 4th day of hospitalization, Eleanor showed up with a yellow wool cardigan and a pot of hot soup. She was the one who held my hand when the nurse said I would be discharged soon, and it was to her that I delivered the letter. "Can you do one thing for me?" I asked. She nodded before she even heard it. "On Sunday at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, stop by the house and leave it with Logan. Just delivered. Don't say anything." She shook my hand and replied, "It will be done." In the following days, I began to remember Evelyn, a distant cousin, the daughter of my mother's older sister. He lived in New Mexico, in Taos. We exchanged Christmas cards until about 5 years ago. Evelyn always told me, "If you ever want to disappear from the world, Myrtle, come here. There is space, there is peace, and no one asks about anyone's life." I laughed at that at the time, but now, those words came back like a saving whisper. I still had her address in an old address book. I called from the hospital. Her voice on the other end was like a warm blanket. "Of course you can come, Myrtle. Of course it is. Here no one owes you anything, and no one expects anything. Just come." That crossed me. That was it. I was leaving, not out of revenge, not out of pride, but for a choice that I never allowed myself to make, to take care of myself. For the first time, I bought a bus ticket for Monday night. I did everything with the care of someone who tidies up his own exit as someone who tidies up an old drawer, without fanfare, but firmly. And on the day of discharge, I returned home as someone who enters a place that no longer belongs. The bed seemed smaller. The smell of the pillow no longer brought me consolation. I packed my bags in silence. A small backpack with some clothes, my medicines, documents, and the old sewing machine, which I took as someone carrying a part of the body. On Sunday, at 5 p.m. sharp, Eleanor knocked on my children's door, and I was no longer in Charleston. I was already on my way to New Mexico, watching through the bus window the landscapes change, as if life was finally changing its skin. But you know what surprised me the most? It wasn't the courage to leave. That's what happened when they opened that letter. That's it. You will need to listen carefully, because their reaction was so unexpected, which to this day echoes in the corridors of my silence. It was Sunday evening, and as Eleanor told me later, her eyes still teary, the sun was beating golden on the porch of Logan's home in Mount Pleasant. It was that kind of day when everything seems too calm, as if the world was about to hold its breath. The family was gathered in the living room, Tiffany with a glass of white wine, talking loudly about the success of Emily's party last Wednesday. The boys played with a new board game, and Logan choked vegetables in the kitchen, trying to appear present. Matthew and Emily had arrived early, with a cheesecake from the French pastry shop she liked. It seemed like another one of those meetings where everything is said, but nothing is said, until the doorbell rang. Eleanor said that Tiffany was the one who answered. He opened the door with that polite smile, and already with the acid tone ready. "Oh, Eleanor, what a surprise. Is Myrtle home yet?" Eleanor, firm, just held out the envelope. "She asked me to deliver this. Now." And he turned his back without waiting for an answer. Tiffany entered with the envelope as if carrying a used napkin. "Guys, look at this. Myrtle sent a dramatic letter. You'll see he's trying to blame us because he decided to leave the hospital without telling anyone." Logan, curious, took the envelope. "Let me see this here." It opened carefully. The first words made him stop. He cleared his throat, straightened his body, and began to read aloud. "Dear children, I do not write out of sorrow, nor out of pity. I write because I need to record what my life was with you." At first, there was still muffled laughter. Tiffany rolled her eyes. Emily exchanged an embarrassed look with Matthew, but Logan continued. As the words unfolded, the atmosphere changed. The sentences they read aloud carried memories. I remember the day I sold my house out of trust. I remember the lettuce salad served on my birthday. I remember your silence as my chest burned, and I asked for help. Gradually, what was mockery turned into discomfort, and from the discomfort, silence was born. Matthew lowered his eyes. Emily tried to keep the air superior, but she couldn't hold the fork anymore. Tiffany, in a burst, tried to interrupt. "This is manipulation. She wants to blame us for everything. It's always the victim." But Logan didn't stop. His voice trembled, but he read, line by line, word for word. The children stopped playing. The air became dense. The smell of the food has lost its taste. It was as if, suddenly, everyone had been placed in front of a mirror they had avoided for years. Maybe you didn't do it out of malice. Perhaps they just followed the pace of the world, which runs too much and listens too little. But no, I saw every gesture, every absence, every choice that pushed me out of your lives. Matthew stood up slowly, like someone going to the bathroom, but stood in the hallway, listening. Logan couldn't look at anyone anymore. Tiffany, embarrassed, tried to laugh, but the sound wouldn't come out. The letter had not yet reached the hardest part, but the damage was already done. The varnish had cracked. That certainty they carried, that they would always be in control, that Myrtle was fragile and dependent, began to crumble, because for the first time, it was Myrtle who said, "Enough," without shouting, without dramatizing, just writing, with the calm of someone who understands that the absence of love is also an answer. And look, if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. Sometimes we just need to know that there is someone on the other side listening. And you, who are here with me so far, get ready, because the cruelest part of that letter was yet to come. Want to know what happened when they got to the last paragraph? So hold on tight, because that was when the truth ceased to be silence, and it turned into a loss. Logan continued reading aloud, but now his voice was low, choked, as if each word weighed twice as much inside his throat. The once lively room was plunged into thick silence. Even the children seemed to sense that something serious was happening. The letter now spoke of the sale of the house. "I sold my home where I raised you, because I trusted. They promised me to give it back. They never gave it back. I didn't ask for interest. I just asked for love." Matthew squinted, swallowing. Tiffany crossed her arms. "This is an exaggeration." She did. Nobody forced it. But no one answered. Those words, written with such serenity, left no room for defense. It was as if the truth had finally taken off the mask, and no one there had the courage to face it. Logan turned the page with trembling hands. She read the part about the Christmas when Myrtle was alone, the cake that no one ate, the wrapped gift that was never fetched. "You said you were busy. I understood. I always understood. I just didn't know that busy meant that my presence was no longer welcome." Emily looked at the floor. For the first time, he said nothing. Not "but it was only that year," or "you should have said it before." Her silence was the loudest of all. Tiffany tried to laugh, nervously. "She has a talent for drama, right? I could have written a soap opera. All that remains is to say that he had a heart attack because of us." And then Logan read the part that no one expected. "In the early hours of Tuesday, my heart stopped 3 times. Eleanor took me to the hospital because no one answered. The doctor called you. He warned me that I might not see the day dawn. And you, they preferred the preparations for a party." The color disappeared from Logan's face. Matthew suddenly got up and left the room. The children asked, "Is Daddy mad?" But no one answered. Tiffany still sat there, now silent, staring into the void. And Emily looked at the envelope like someone looking at a cracked mirror. It was as if, for the first time, they had seen not the mother who had always been there, but the woman behind that mother. The wounded, silent, erased woman. The letter continued. "I don't tell you this, so that you regret it, not even for them to feel guilty. I tell you to understand that I am also tired. That also hurt me. And that, this time, I chose to leave before my heart left for good. And then, the last sentence. Logan read in an almost inaudible voice, "Don't look for me. Now I have chosen myself." The paper fell from his lap. Tiffany got up and stamped her feet out. The children ran after her, frightened. Logan sat there staring at nothing. And it was at this point that, according to Eleanor told me later, no one said anything else. No one knew what to do, because what is dissolved in silence, it is not rebuilt with excuses. And look, if you've made it this far with me, let me tell you something. The most painful moment is yet to come, because it's not just about what I lost. It's about what they found out too late. Do you want to know what happened after silence took over that house? So stay with me, because what came next? No one expected it. They didn't know it. But as they digested every word of the letter on Sunday afternoon, I was already cruising through the open fields of Texas, inside a bus that smelled of warm coffee and wet wipes. I looked out the window and saw the world changing color. The sky seemed wider, and the silence inside was different. It was not that of loneliness. It was that of freedom. Meanwhile, on the other side, they finally woke up. Logan was the first to try. He called the hospital. I wanted to talk to the doctor, to understand if I was still hospitalized. The answer came cold. The patient was discharged 2 days ago. He was in shock. But she didn't warn us. The attendant only repeated, "She left of her own free will." I was lucid. Tiffany, in a panic, began to call everything that was neighbor. He knocked on Eleanor's door as if he wanted to get answers by force. Eleanor was direct. She asked that she not be sought. And that's all I'm going to say. Matthew, nervous, tried to contact a distant cousin in Colombia. Nothing. No sign. No clue. Logan returned to my apartment. The door was locked, the key left at the entrance. When he entered, the emptiness of the room swallowed him. There was no furniture, no photos, no souvenirs, just the marks on the wall where a painting used to be. They found out that I had terminated the contract with the real estate company 2 weeks earlier, and that I sold everything. Stove, refrigerator, sofa, everything that could become money or relief. On Monday, when they opened an old bank statement, they saw a withdrawal movement, an account they didn't even know existed. It was the one I opened after the sale of the house, where I left the little that was left of retirement. And there, at that moment, they realized it was not an impulse. It wasn't drama. It was a choice, planning, meticulous silence. And you know, there are things that only pain makes us see. Logan, Eleanor told me later, couldn't sleep that night. I kept walking around the house, looking at the empty corners as if my absence had become a ghost. Matthew didn't go to work. He spent the day inside the car, parked in a parking lot, not knowing where to go. Tiffany freaked out. He tried to track my cell phone, threatened to involve the police, said it was a disappearance, but no one took it seriously, because there was no disappearance. There was a decision. And when a woman my age decides to leave, it's not escape. It is liberation. Now, allow me a pause here. Have you ever experienced something like this? Have you ever felt that someone who everyone thought was fragile suddenly showed a strength that no one saw coming? Or have you ever had to disappear from the world to find yourself again? If you've experienced this, or know someone who has gone through something similar, write it down below. It can be just, "I've seen this, I understand," or even a special memory that was stored in your heart, because there are memories that never disappear, and when we share, they become a bridge with each other. That's why I'm here telling you mine, because I know that, on the other side of this screen, maybe there is someone who is also waiting for the right time to leave. But back to that day. While they drowned in missed calls and unanswered messages, I was already sleeping in a simple, lavender-scented room with a crocheted blanket at Evelyn's house in Taos. And do you know what awaited me that morning? A coffee brewed calmly, a silence that didn't hurt, and a welcome letter left on the table, with only 3 words. "You are saved." But what did my children do after they realized that for the first time, they no longer had power over me? Oh, then the most unexpected part of it all begins, because it was in their desperation that the truth has come out, and she does not forgive. It didn't take long. 2 days after that silent afternoon were enough, and my name was already circulating among voices that I had not heard for a long time. It started at church back in Charleston, where I spent years serving coffee at the end of services and helping with Christmas raffles. A sister of the choir, Donna Clarice, asked in a prayer group, "Has anyone seen Myrtle?" I heard that she disappeared and left only a letter for her children. That lit a fuse of gunpowder, because when a woman like me disappears without scandal but with dignity, people start to pay attention to what they never noticed before. Silence draws more attention than screaming. Soon, the phone calls began. Evelyn warned me. "They're asking about you, Myrtle." People from the church, from the Saturday market, even a pastor from Florence called wanting to know how you are. I asked her to say just this: "She is at peace," and the rest took care of running alone. A former colleague at the laundry where I worked for 20 years recalled at a community lunch that I used to leave the factory at 10 p.m. with swollen feet and still go to the market to buy snacks for the boys. A neighbor of the old house told me that, even with my fingers hurting from sewing, I made Emily's graduation dress when she was still engaged to Matthew. I said that Tiffany, when she received the wedding invitation, didn't even mention my name. The stories began to sprout like ancient seeds that finally found good soil. She was always discreet, but we knew, they said. He never failed anyone. A lady from the church revealed that one year I sold my wedding ring to pay for the repair of Logan's car, and that, the following Christmas, he showed up with a new watch on his wrist, but he didn't even bring me a flower. What was murmuring became a chain. What was a doubt became a certainty. The views on my children began to change. Logan, who has always been the darling at church lunches, felt the change first. "Where's your mother, Logan? Why didn't she come to the Thanksgiving service?" they asked. He smiled yellow, made short excuses. But the eyes, the eyes of those who ask with faith see deeply. Tiffany stopped attending the Savannah Event Club. He said that people were being cruel, judgmental, but deep down, it was the discomfort of no longer being the reference she cultivated so much. Emily, in turn, disappeared from all the meetings at the school where she taught. He asked for leave, alleging personal reasons. And Matthew didn't post anything else on social media. His silence came to be interpreted as guilt. The most curious thing was how some tried to invert the narrative. They said that I was manipulating with silence, that I left the family desperate. But it didn't stick, because my story was being told by other mouths now, and there was no denying the facts. There was no denying the absences, the parties at which I was not invited, the dinners at which I was forgotten, and more than anything, there was no denying that for decades, I served everyone, and I was served only by loneliness. Gradually, the masks began to fall. The respect they demanded no longer came naturally, and Logan, more than anyone, felt the blow. A coworker commented, "Man, my mom admired you so much. She doesn't understand how you let it get to this point." These phrases hurt more than cursing, because they are said with disappointment, and the disappointment of others, when we are adults, weighs more than punishment. And look, let me tell you something that maybe only those who have lived it understand. There is a kind of justice that does not need revenge. It is the justice of conscience. That's when people realize they've lost something valuable. Not because you yelled, but because you left. And I went. But the story doesn't end here. No, because something was still missing. Something I never imagined would happen. An answer, a letter, an attempt to redeem himself. And it came, but not who you think of. And it was this answer that showed once and for all that time. Time has its own means of doing justice. Do you want to know who wrote to me? Then hold your heart, because what's next? Everything changed. I arrived in Santa Fe on a warm afternoon, one of those when the wind seems to whisper old memories just to see if we still feel anything. The bus stopped on a small gravel street, and I got off with my small suitcase, and my heart pounding as if I was doing something wrong, even though I knew deep down that it wasn't. Evelyn was waiting for me leaning against an old car, with a flowered scarf covering her gray hair and open arms. She didn't say why. She didn't ask what happened, nor did she make that face of someone who already knew everything. He just said, "Come, the room is ready." And I went. The smell of her house was a mixture of rosemary and baked bread. There was a lace curtain on the kitchen window, a worn wooden table, and a kettle that beeped just like my mother's, back in the days when being a daughter was lighter than being a mother. As she showed me around the house, Evelyn offered me silence. a kind of good silence, which does not weigh down, which does not pressure. It just lets you exist. He gave me the back room, with a blue bedspread and a rocking chair facing a window that looked out of nowhere. And at the same time, everything. The horizon there seemed longer, deeper. I sat in that chair that night and cried, but it was a different cry. It was not anger, nor sadness. It was the cry of someone who realizes that he survived, who came out of a decades-long emotional war and can still smell the jasmine. Evelyn didn't ask, but she left me a note on top of the dresser. It said, "Here, you don't need to explain anything. Just breathe." And I breathed. For the first time in many years, I ate without haste, slept without guilt, woke up without obligation. No one asked me for coffee. No one complained about the smell of my perfume. No one criticized my food or my way of arranging the cutlery. The radio was playing quietly in the kitchen. The kettle beeped at the same time, and I began, very slowly, to exist for myself. It was strange, a kind of freedom that was almost frightening, because when we spend our whole lives serving others, we forget what it's like to be a person. Only mother, only grandmother, I only support, never center. Evelyn would take me to the town market, where people greeted each other looking into the eyes. Sometimes I just sat in the square with a book on my lap and my thoughts far, far away. And in those moments, do you know what I felt? Peace. A timid peace at first. Suspicious. But then she got braver. And on one of those late afternoons, while the sun was hiding behind the mountains and I smelled the smell of cinnamon biscuits coming from the kitchen, I realized I didn't miss it. Not Logan, not Matthew, not the Sundays when I was forgotten. I missed them. Yes, but I didn't miss them. I missed myself, of the woman I was before I was swallowed up by the paper I was given. And when that penny dropped, I knew I was starting over. And if you think that so far it has been intense, get ready, because it was precisely at that moment of peace, when my heart was beginning to heal, that something unexpected came. A letter. But it wasn't who I imagined, and what she said. Everything changed again. Santa Fe has its own way of hugging us without haste. The city doesn't run, it walks, as if to say, you don't need to hurry to live. And it was at this pace that I began to rebuild myself, little by little. First, there were the walks in the morning. I would walk down the cobblestone street in my wool jacket and go to the market near Praça das Rosas. There I saw simple people, people with time, people who still look into each other's eyes. I started to recognize faces. One day, a lady with well-armed white hair, Dolores was her name, offered me a pine nut cookie. "You're new around here, right?" I smiled. "I am, new in many ways." And she laughed, as if she understood more than she said. In the afternoon, I sat down with Evelyn, and for the first time, took the old sewing box out of the closet. I had left it in storage for almost 10 years, since Tiffany said that my point was old-fashioned. But that afternoon, no charges, no hurry, no one expecting anything from me. My hands went back to sewing, and it was as if each stitch there also sewed a piece of me. I made a dishcloth embroidered with lavender. The next day, I took it to the market and donated it to the group of ladies who raised funds for a community daycare center. They smiled, and one of them said, "This here has a soul." And there I realized, my value did not depend on approval. It never depended. It was only hidden under so many years of silence. I started writing in a notebook. Nothing much. Just small snippets of what I saw, felt, remembered. Evelyn said they were poetry, but I just wrote as someone who needs to hear themselves again. I met other women too. Single, widowed, some abandoned like me, but all of them. Women who learned to live with their emptiness, and even so, knew how to laugh the way I had forgotten. I sat down with them one afternoon to have tea, and one told me, "We spend our lives thinking that we are supporting in the story of others, until we discover that we can write our own." I have never forgotten this phrase. And if you're listening to me now, let me ask you something with affection. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. So, enjoy this video and subscribe, because this story here, which is mine, can be someone else's too. And if it is, that it arrives. The days went by, and each morning was a small victory. I looked at myself in the mirror and no longer saw only the exhausted mother. He saw the woman who survived. The pain still came, of course, sometimes at night, suddenly. I remembered the empty Christmases, the phone calls that didn't come, the unfulfilled promises. But the difference is that now they didn't knock me down. They passed like waves, and I learned to float in them. I no longer expected calls. I didn't count the days for a visit. I was enough. And when I realized that, I smiled at myself as if I were meeting an old friend. Until one day, when I returned from the bakery, I found Evelyn sitting on the porch with an envelope in her hands. The paper was thick, elegant, different from ordinary letters. She looked at me slowly. "It's come to you." I picked up the envelope with my hands a little shaky. The sender? Tiffany. And for an instant, time stopped. My heart beat strangely, because whatever was there, it could reopen wounds or seal the scar once and for all. And now you must be wondering, did it open? Did she read it? What could Tiffany have written after all? Well then, stay with me, because this letter, my God, this letter, he said more than any word spoken aloud. It took me 2 days to open the envelope. Not because I was afraid of Tiffany, but because I felt that this role could pull me back to a time I fought so hard to leave behind. But on the third morning, with the sun coming in softly through the bedroom window, I sat on the porch, took a deep breath, and broke the seal. The handwriting was impeccable, without erasures, like everything she did. Beautiful on the outside, icy on the inside. He said they were worried, that the boys were feeling bad about everything that happened, that Logan had lost weight, that Matthew cried often, that Emily was quiet, that maybe I had exaggerated, that my absence had left their house in disarray, but in no paragraph, no words of apology, no forgive me, no you were right, just a barely disguised discomfort with the lack of control. She didn't ask for my return. He asked me to show up, just to ease their guilt. I closed the letter calmly and put it under the kettle, and I stood there, looking at the mountains of New Mexico, thinking about how many times I begged for crumbs of presents, while they toasted my absence. The following week, Evelyn received a phone call. It was Emily. She wanted to know if I was okay. He did not insist. He only asked him to say that she had called. On Sunday, another envelope arrived. This time, handwritten by Matthew, the shaky handwriting, a request for forgiveness. He said he found a box with the drawings he made in childhood. They were all dated, with my notes on the back. One said, "Today he fell on the playground and cried. I held him until he fell asleep." Another, "First time you wrote mother alone. I kept it forever." He said he spent hours reading it and feeling a pain he couldn't name. He said he loved me, that he understood if I didn't want any more contact, but that if I ever left a letter back, he promised to keep it as a relic. And you know, I believed it. Logan sent an email, cold, as he always was. He said he was being monitored. The therapist said that sometimes the silence of those we love is the harshest form of truth. He said he understood my disappearance, but he didn't know how to deal with it. He confessed that the last memory he had with me was of a lunch in which I made chicken soup, and he was on his cell phone the whole time. He said that if he could go back, he would have looked me in the eyes, but he couldn't, and it hurt him more than anything. The news was coming through Evelyn. Tiffany no longer spoke to Logan as she used to. They slept in separate rooms. She said that he was no longer the same. He said he was finally starting to see. Emily, on the other hand, began to visit the church again. She spoke to a mutual friend and asked if I used to pray for them. The answer was simple. She prayed even while she sewed. One day, Evelyn arrived from the street with a small box in her hands. It was a package coming from Charleston. Inside, there was a picture frame. It was a photo of me with the 2 small boys playing in the backyard. On the back, written in firm handwriting, "Sorry, Mom. I forgot who you were. Now I remember." It wasn't signed, but I knew it was Logan. And look, if you're still here listening to me, let me tell you something with an open heart. Not every request for forgiveness comes when we need it. Sometimes it comes after the damage has already become a landscape. But still, it arrives. And when it comes, we need to be strong enough not to let it dismantle us again. Because the most beautiful thing about this whole story was yet to come. Yes, there's more. Because just when I thought my heart had already remade itself the way it could, someone knocked on my door. And what came next? My God, not even in my wildest dreams would I have imagined. Life here in Santa Fe was settling down on me the same way the evening light lays down on the mountains. Slowly, serene, but firmly. I started going to a small fabric shop near the central square. It was small, with shelves crammed with colorful patchwork, lines and shades I didn't even know existed, and a constant smell of lavender and wood. The owner, a lady named Becca, received me as if she were meeting an old friend. When he saw my point, he said, "You have gold in your hands, Myrtle." And he called me to help 2 afternoons a week. It wasn't work, it was therapy. I folded fabrics, helped girls choose prints, told stories of my old sewing, and he listened too. I listened a lot. Stories of other women, other pains, other victories. It was as if, there, each line was a small shared healing. I signed up for a painting class at a community school. The first time I held the brush, my hands trembled, but when the paint touched the canvas, I felt something open inside. It wasn't talent, it was freedom. I painted an empty chair under a copper-colored sky. The teacher looked at me and said, "This has a soul," and I felt like she saw what I didn't know she was saying. Gradually, I went back to reading. I joined a reading group with other ladies from the region. We met in the library, drank chamomile tea, and debated books that talked about everything, except pain. They spoke of travel, discoveries, new beginnings, and it was there that, for the first time, they called me the Myrtle of Art. Not the mother of, not the lady who lost everything, not the poor thing, just Myrtle. That's it. It gave me a peace that I can't even describe. The nights were mine. I lit a vanilla candle, put on an old record to play softly, and embroidered it. Not out of obligation, for pleasure. I made dish towels with phrases that came from my heart. One of them said, "Whoever chooses his own silence never again accepts a shout." Another, "The right absence is worth more than the wrong presence." Becca saw it and started selling in the store. And look, they all sold. People bought and took away excited. One young woman even wrote to me, "This cloth changed my day. Thank you for taking courage." I smiled and put the note in a box that I keep just for good memories. Because now, you see, the past still lives in me, but it became a memory, non-current, not weight, not open wound. Today I looked at myself in the mirror and no longer saw the tired eyes of those who beg for affection. I saw a woman who, even patched up, is still standing, stronger, more whole, more self-possessed. And if you've been here with me so far, I want to tell you something that only those who really live understand. Freedom doesn't scream. She whispers, and when it arrives, we recognize it. Because it's a whisper that comes from within. And it was exactly in this state of mind, in this calm conquered at the cost of so much silence and renunciation, that Evelyn, one afternoon, ran in the kitchen door. She held her phone, her face pale, her eyes full of an urgency I hadn't seen in a long time. "Myrtle, it's about Logan." My hand stopped in the air, the cloth fell to the ground, and in that instant, I knew. Peace needs to be protected. But was I ready for what came next? I received Logan's letter, and instinctively I knew before I even opened it that its contents carried the weight of years of guilt. Evelyn brought it to me on a quiet afternoon, when the sun cast long shadows through the living room windows. I sat down in the old armchair, the one I had inherited from my mother, and carefully opened the envelope. The first few lines already crossed me. He admitted that he had neglected it, that he had chosen parties, appearances, and the company of Tiffany and Emily instead of worrying about his own mother's life. Each word was a slow but necessary stroke, an acknowledgement that he finally understood what the emptiness I had felt for so long meant. He spoke of sleepless nights thinking about the mistakes, the Christmases he spent without me, the moments he could never recover. There were tears of his between the lines, though I couldn't feel them physically. Matthew sent his own letter shortly after, shorter, but loaded with a sincerity that surprised me. He timidly admitted his faults and expressed the desire to somehow make up for the past, but he did not ask for my return. He only recognized my value, my silence that had always been, so generous and so often ignored. As I read, I felt a strange mixture of emotion, joy at seeing them finally confront their own flaws, sadness at realizing that everything was coming too late. It was the first time I understood that forgiving was not about opening doors again. It was not about inviting anyone back to what they had emotionally destroyed. It was to accept, internally, that I had made my choice, and that the cycle was complete. I cried silently, unhurriedly, each tear a ritual of liberation. I didn't answer. I didn't call. I didn't write. I just kept the letters in a wooden box, along with the memories and objects I chose to preserve, symbols of my reconstructed life. Evelyn watched me with an understanding smile, without saying a word, because she understood that this was the moment when my emotional maturity was consolidated. For the first time, I felt that my power came not from control or revenge, but from the conscious choice to live for myself. And it was at that moment, holding those letters, that I realized true justice did not need confrontations. It did not need screams or tears of regret from others to be complete. Their absence now had more force than any forced presence could have. I was whole again. And I knew that the freedom I had won would not be broken by belated excuses. The next chapter of my life didn't depend on Logan, Matthew, Tiffany, or Emily. It depended only on me, on every step I would take in the days to come, fully and consciously. But one question still hung in the air, silent and powerful. Did they really understand what they lost? Or did they just cling to the hope of fixing something that could no longer be recovered? Today, at 68, I look back on life in Santa Fe with a serene smile and a light heart. I completed another birthday surrounded by people who chose to stay, not out of obligation, not out of formality, but out of genuine affection. I prepared a simple cake, one of those that remind me of childhood, and I felt the warmth of the sincere hugs that came from each friend who surrounded me. I remembered the years of sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the lonely Christmases, the unsent letters, and the frustrated attempts to be seen by my children. And finally, I understood that true justice came not from their suffering, but from my own liberation. Logan and Matthew continue their lives, but now they carry the void that parties, status, or money could never fill. I found that I needed no revenge. He needed only distance, self-respect, and peace. The greatest victory of a mother, I learned, is not to annul herself to continue existing. It is to choose her own happiness without looking back. And if you, on the other side, feel the weight of relationships that diminish you, know that it is possible to free yourself, and sometimes distance is the greatest proof of self-love. If this story touched your heart, leave a like. It's like a hug that warms and supports this channel. Subscribe. It's like an invitation to come back for the next coffee. And share in the comments which city you're watching. I want to feel our community united. Activate the bell so you don't lose it when the coffee is ironed again. And don't go away yet. Listen to the next real story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.